Hi everyone, today I'm going to talk to you about the differences between nylon and Dyneema. Two very important materials used all over the climbing world, two very different materials. So why should you care? Well, nylon and Dyneema have some very interesting properties, and if you don't know how to use them correctly in an outdoor scenario when you're rigging anchors and so on, it could mean the difference between an anchor failure and staying safe and climbing on. So first of all, let's talk about nylon. So here I have a 7mm nylon sling made of accessory cord, but they also come just like in a webbing form, just like this Dyneema here. Now, nylon was first invented in the 1930s, and it was of great interest to the military during World War II. It was made into ropes, parachutes, things like that. It's an incredibly versatile material because it's good and it's strong. So you can most often find nylon slings in climbing shops rated to 22 kilonewtons, just like Dyneema slings. And nylon has the very advantageous ability to stretch. So studies quote different amounts of elasticity, but you could expect a nylon sling to stretch by up to about 10% of its original length when it's loaded. So, if you're rigging an anchor system with a nylon sling, you're clipping in, you've made a cordelette or whatever, that elasticity will take some pressure off your primary placements, off your bolts or cams, nuts, whatever you're building your anchor out of. Now, if we move on to Dyneema, also known as Spectra, this has been in development for some time, since the 50s. It's also known as polyethylene. Now, Dyneema came onto the market in the 1990s, and the reason it's so popular with climbing is because it has a fantastic strength to weight ratio. So in other words, you can have a very light, minimal piece of Dyneema, but it can be incredibly strong. So, in terms of actual strength to weight, it's stronger than steel. So this happens to be a 22 kilonewton Dyneema rubber runner by DMM, and if I was to be holding the same length of sling, same strength rating, but made by nylon, it would be much heavier, much wider. You'd need more nylon to achieve the same strength. So you can imagine, if you're racking loads of slings on your harness, well, it makes more sense to carry Dyneema because you're not carrying as much bulk on your harness. It's more convenient. And also, Dyneema as well is more resistant to UV, it's more resistant to abrasion, it's more resistant to water. So as you can see, very advantageous. Now the question is, why is nylon still hanging around? Well, it's hanging around because of the shock absorption. Yes, this is rated to 22 kilonewtons, it's very, very strong, but Dyneema will only stretch up to a maximum of 3%. At least that's what the research tells us. Whereas with nylon, you've got 10%. What does that mean? Well, if you're rigging an anchor system with a Dyneema sling, let's say you make a cordelette, for example, out of Dyneema webbing, Dyneema tape, excuse me, like this here. Well, if the anchor system is suddenly loaded, let's say the climber falls onto the anchor, so it's a fall factor 2 in a multi-pitch situation, that Dyneema is going to remain rigid. It's going to be putting all that force through the climbing rope and then onto your anchors, cams, whatever, whereas the nylon will absorb a little bit of that shock. Now, having said that, is it the end of the world? Should you really stress about this as a climber? Well, it is important, but if there's climbing rope in the system, then it's not too much of a big deal, because climbing rope it's very dynamic and can reduce peak forces up to about 8 kilonewtons. So for most climbers, they'll be quite happy with Dyneema. But if you're building an anchor out of, say, cams, nuts and so on, and their marginal placements, you're much better off with nylon. 7 to 8mm nylon accessory cord, it's an absolute must in your bag. And Dyneema, well, it's okay for quick draws, it's okay for the occasional sling. One thing I would mention is Dyneema can be extremely dangerous if you're using it as a personal anchor. So let's say you girth hitch this Dyneema sling to your belay loop, and just because you want a quick piece of personal anchorage, you clip it into a bolt in the wall and you've got nothing else protecting you. And climbers often do that, especially with daisy chains made of Dyneema. if you were to climb above the bolt, okay, so you climb all the way above the bolt as far as the sling will allow, like so, and then you suddenly slip and you fall below the bolt as much as the sling will allow. So essentially you've taken a fall factor 2 on this Dyneema sling. There is a good chance that the sling will fail. And DMM released a video some time ago testing this theory, and lo and behold, because it's a static material, it doesn't stretch, you know, the material will break. Even though it's rated to 22 kilonewtons, it's incredible how much force, you know, a fall can generate if there's no shock absorbing material in the system. So there we go, there's Dyneema, there's nylon, two very different materials, but it's important to know the difference. I hope you found this video helpful. For more informational videos like this, check out obsessionclimbing.com, and thanks for watching.